Welcome. This is Marty with FLIR Security's TCX Training Department, and we're here today to talk about failover archiving, the system's ability to take cameras from an archiver that goes offline or dies and redistribute them to other archivers within the system. So let's go ahead and take a look here on the left-hand side. We have our physical view, and you can see in my system I have two archivers, one here called Archiver 1 and the other one called Archiver 2, and each one only has one camera on them. So let's go ahead and take a look about how we set up our system to make sure that we do have this in place. So let's go to Archiver 1. And you can see on the General tab right here, we do have a Failover Configuration section that we need to set up. It's quite easy. We go ahead and enable it. Notice the second checkbox below there allows us to end the failover automatically, or we can actually engage it physically right from the menu right here, where we could start the failover right here just to check our settings after we set it up. And then once it's engaged, of course, we can then choose to end failover if that's the case. But this checkbox right here will automatically do that for us once the system comes back up and is running. Now, the failover priority is something that we use. Now, with only two archivers in my system, it's going to be a little bit difficult to show how it prioritizes because it won't. It'll just use the one that's there. For instance, if this archiver dies, this one will take it over, right? Then the priority here doesn't really come into play. But in a system that I had multiple archivers, if any archiver dies, it's always going to look for the highest number right here first, and then it's going to utilize these two fields down here to figure out how many cameras to deposit at this archiver. So let's go ahead and, for instance, this number right here is the maximum camera capacity in failover mode. So if I just set this at 10, you can see the available capacity then to receive cameras while it's in failover mode is 9. Why? Because 10 is the maximum. I have one camera already on it, and so 9 is the available capacity that it has left to drop off. Now, keep that in mind. If I have three archivers, for instance, and archiver 1 dies, and I have these numbers set right here. Now, this number right here, the maximum capacity, is actually set by an administrator. It's an arbitrary number that I just chose, so we could keep it nice and simple. But basically, you need to figure out how many cameras your particular archivers can handle. And then obviously, if you want to use this particular archiver in the failover mode, it needs more capacity. It has to have some availability to receive some of those cameras. Now, what you could do also is set your capacity to the number of cameras that you currently have on that archiver. And then, of course, it would not be in failover mode. It would pass by it. Now, where does it go originally? Well, if an archiver dies, it looks for the available highest priority on any of the archivers that are left that are set up to engage in failover functionality. And then it looks here and it says, how many can I deposit here? So for instance, if I have an archiver that has 50 cameras on it and it has died, it would look right to this one first, right? Because it's the 100 priority, the highest that there is. And it would say, oh, this only has the capacity of 9. So of my 50, I'll drop off 9 with this archiver. And then I'm going to continue down the list of prioritized archivers, 99, 98, etc., and deposit my remaining cameras on those available archivers. So it's a really easy sort of setup. And again, this number is chosen by the administrator. You have to know how many cameras that your system can accept. You don't want to try to overload it, right? If it can't accept 50 cameras for whatever reason and the system tries to dump it on there, we could have a problem. So keep that in mind. Again, I've set this one up. I've set it to 100. I'll go ahead and hit save at the top. And then I'll come back to my second archiver and do the same thing. Enable it. I'll leave that in automatic ending and the prioritization. Again, I generally don't want two archivers with the same priority, but with one dies, I'll only have one left, so it really doesn't matter what I set this to. But just to keep in general practice, I'll set this to 99 just in case. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally unplug this archiver right from the system, and you're going to see the camera go offline and then eventually pop up right on archiver 1. So let's go ahead and hit save now here. And now what I'll do is I'll just disconnect or physically my archiver 2 from the network, which I've just done. Please hold as the camera will go offline and the archiver will start. We're going to start to see some red lightings in here indicating the archiver itself is offline. Now what we expect to see once that occurs is this camera or this encoder will automatically be attaching itself to archiver 1 once the failover is complete. So let's hold on a few minutes here. And actually, not too long, maybe about 2 minutes total from the time I started to talk. We should see it take place. So hold tight. And as you can see, the camera now showing offline, the archiver showing offline. We also see the other indicator up here that the camera has now moved over to its failover. And eventually what you're going to see here once these things all go away, and basically what it does is it detaches the camera from the dead archiver and reattaches it to the now Savior archiver or the Failover archiver. And as such, it's going to take at least 2 minutes probably for this to occur. So I don't want anybody to think this is an automatic thing. It does take the system some time to be able to complete this task. But once it does, you can see now I'm in failover mode. And as I mentioned before, I could go to the archiver itself and end the failover, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just plug it back in and do it automatically. So again, I'm now clicking in the network cable back into my archiver. And this one is a little bit quicker, probably shouldn't take more than just about 20 seconds or so, and it will sort of fail back to itself. And then finally, the last thing we'll do is we'll open up Control Center and we'll check it out, and we'll actually see the video blocks where we missed, as it was failing over to itself, but then start recording again on the Failover archiver once it gets there. As you can see, the camera has moved back now to the previously dead archiver, and it does take just a couple seconds for each one of these ports to realign itself and come back on live, and there you can see most of them have. The last two sometimes will take a little while to go away, but they will go away, and I do believe that the camera is back up and running again. So now what we want to do is check Control Center so we can see what happened in Control Center and indicate that our camera was recording on its own archiver for a while. Then we're going to see a little block of nothingness as I unplugged the cable for that archiver, and then you're going to see it start recording again once it's back on the original. And then probably another really quick block of nothingness as it fails back over to itself. So hold tight. There we go. Now again, that indicator does take a second or two or maybe a minute or so to go away, but it doesn't mean that it's not available. So what I'm going to do is take this, put it back. We'll see the live view. And there it is. And if I click on the instant replay, we will see, as I mentioned, this was the recording that just started back up. As you can see, the block of video that we lost as it was re-engaging itself. So now, Failover Archiver is one of those things that we use when we want to make sure that we don't lose video, other than the little block that you're going to lose, of course, as it does its failover process.